All right, we're live. Welcome to the Why Dad podcast. We are your hosts, Paul Wandry and Andrew Stopelstead, and we are on a mission to find out what it means to be a dad. To find out what it means to be a dad, why it matters, and how to be the best that we can be. That doesn't mean being perfect, just like this intro, but it does mean striving, struggling, and striding forward every day. And in light of that mission, I'm excited to introduce, drumroll please, our first official guest on our podcast, John Fogel. John is a parenting educator, author, counselor, pastor, and parent of four. Quite a mouthful there. And he recently published what is already proving to be an extremely impactful book, Punishment-Free Parenting, which, spoiler, does not mean discipline-free. John's unique approach to parenting combines neuroscience, psychology, and lived experience in a way that is practical and evidence-based and helps kids grow into their own skin rather than predetermined mold. John, super excited to have you on. Welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here. I've been an early follower of your show as you guys did an episode about a video that I made, and I've loved the stuff that I've heard so far, and so I'm just excited to support you and also, be your first guest. It's an honor to be the first.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, you mentioned exactly kind of what linked us up. You had a thought-provoking reel, which I think means it was an effective reel, and we did a reaction episode. So maybe that's a good place to start. So the reel was something to the effect of, we shouldn't teach our children, right? Is that the proper tagline?
Yeah. So I mean, the first thing to say, the whole premise of the video was that our job as parents is not to teach our children what, but rather to teach our children how to learn. So most parents, I think, fall into this trap, and I blame the way that we do education in the United States, the Prussian system of education. Most parents fall into this trap of I need to make sure that my kid knows these things or does these things or understands these things. And my kind of assertion, and we have to also understand the medium here of being a real social media short form, less than 90-second video. My assertion, with very little nuance and essentially no, hedging, was that you actually don't have to teach your kids anything, which I think is pretty. I think that's pretty inaccurate as far as what I actually believe, but I think it speaks to the underlying kind of cutting against deconstruction of this assumption that we are the ones who teach our kids everything that there is to know. Right. So are there things that you have to teach your kids? Like absolutely, because, and in fact, I think sometimes the gentle parenting or conscious parenting movement shields kids and shelters kids away from things that they need to learn.
Right.
That said, I think that the way in which we do that can be more or less effective. So we can take this in a bunch of different directions. Like, why do I think that we do this wrong in the education system? That's like my next book that I'm researching for, and I don't know if that's exactly what the book's going to be about, or discipline in general. But I do think that by and large we focus far too much on what we are teaching our kids rather than teaching them how to get the information that they need to have. And a great example of that just happened in the New York Times, actually, I don't want to say like the last 2 or 3 days, where they published an article about ChatGPT and education. And basically they were like, education is dead because ChatGPT has killed education. And all these college students are cheating on everything using ChatGPT. And to me, that just betrays a fundamental, indoctrination to this idea of even what is cheating, right? Like, why do we define using certain tools? For me, when I was growing up, it was Wikipedia, but now it's ChatGPT. Why do we define that as cheating, rather than critiquing the information that ChatGPT is putting out and saying, hey, this is wrong. You said in an article here that's not relevant for your thing. Defend that. Well, I can't defend it because ChatGPT just told me to do it.
Right.
Okay, well then let's Then let's pull that apart. Let's tear the threads apart of that. Okay, so you were relying on a tool that you can't rely on in that way. Yeah. Instead of doing that, we just immediately default to, oh, well, this is cheating. And a great example of this, is if you take a kid and you say, okay, cheating is immoral or it's wrong or whatever, and then you say, okay, so if you stand outside the classroom door in high school chemistry or whatever, and you have a cheat sheet, a study sheet, and the teacher's giving you all the answers ahead of time, which is what most teachers are doing these days, and they give you all the answers to this ahead of time, and you come up with a really tricky mnemonic device where you memorize the whole sheet, and then you walk in, and 30 seconds later, you write down all of the answers that you've just memorized with your mnemonic onto your test paper in some blank white space. And then you take the test and you get 100. That's not cheating.
Right.
But if you come into the class with that test paper and you just don't do that mnemonic instead, that's cheating. And we've just decided that arbitrarily this 30 seconds of, oh, you could remember it for 30 seconds. That means, and it doesn't matter what you can do, a year from now or a month from now or even a day from now or an hour from now. It doesn't matter if you can remember any of this stuff. One of those is cheating. One of those is really great test-taking strategies.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that I think I'm trying to deconstruct is this idea that we should be teaching our kids what rather than how to reason through, how to problem solve, and how to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a conversation Paul and I just had, was it Thursday night?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically just how important it is that kids, I'm aspiring to be a dad, I'm single, I want to have a family, but now we're running into, they have access to all these tools. How do we make sure they use them as tools and learn to think critically and, use the reasoning process through all of that instead of simply relying on these tools, which goes hand in hand with exactly what you just said. Just we want to teach our children the how. Like, we can give them the what, just like all these tools. And, I see it, like, even in my master's program over the last year and a half, in our group study sessions and whatnot, like, I would just go through some of these on discussion boards and just be like, you copy-pasted that from ChatGPT. Like,
100%.
So, even us as adults now struggle with being able to utilize all of our faculties. So how do we teach our children to utilize those gifts and our reasoning, our abilities, if we struggle with it?
Well, I think it comes down to what's the ultimate goal here, right? And I think that's, if you want my book in a nutshell, it's raise kids who are going to be whole humans and emotionally regulated and all this stuff at 30, at 35.
Yeah.
Most parents are not thinking with their 2-year-old, with their 4-year-old, with their 9-year-old, with their 16-year-old. They're not thinking about, well, how's my kid going to be able to process their emotions at 40?
Right.
How's my kid going to navigate a midlife crisis? In many ways, parents just kind of wash their hands of that, and they just say, oh, well, that's not my job anymore. Somehow your job ends for most parents. And so they front load all of their education, teaching, discipline to be about, I got to get my kid to 18 where they're going to get into a good college. And now we see an extension of that as really, most people are not really adults until they're in their mid-20s.
Right.
So now you're on your parents' health insurance until you're 25. You're probably screwing around at some college campus or something or doing whatever, living at home, whatever. And so maybe parents have extended that, I need to get my kid to 18, I need to get my kid to 23, 24.
Right.
But then it stops. Then they go, anything after that is not up to me. Then my kid is just, they're on their own. I think what's a much smarter way to parent is to go, the majority of my kid's life is going to be lived after they're 25 or after they're 35.
Yeah.
Right? So the majority of their life, if your kid lives to 80 or 81, the majority of their life is going to be after they're age 40. And yet, for half of our kids' life, maybe even 2/3 of our kids' life, we don't do any parenting to help them through those 2/3 of their life. We just parent them to help them through the first third. So resetting our goals and saying, okay, why are kids doing ChatGPT? Why are they using ChatGPT to do all their busy work? Why are they using ChatGPT in a master's degree program? Well, because they have decided that the reason that they're getting the master's degree, or the reason that they're in statistics, or the reason that they're in, is just for the grade. It's just for the means to an end. When I wrote Punishment-Free Parenting, ChatGPT existed. I could have just used it to say, write me a parenting book, and here's all the resources that I want you to do. And it was early enough that there was nothing in my contract telling me I couldn't do that. Right? So I could have done that, but the result of that would have been, number one, a much worse book, obviously.
Yeah.
But number two, I would have been trading away the opportunity to write a book.
Yeah.
Like, it was hundreds of hours of work. It was hundreds of hours of work that I wanted to do, that were fulfilling, that were life-giving. I wasn't just seeking the end product and people and sales and royalties. I actually wanted to do the thing. And I think that what we're failing to understand is when kids are using ChatGPT for every single one of their classes, what they're telling us is, I'm thoroughly unmotivated to learn any of this stuff.
Right.
Because if I can get away without learning it, my wife is a great example of this. She said, my goal in high school was to learn as little as possible. Because that was the game.
Right.
The game was minimal effort for maximum result. And for her, result was a letter on a page.
Right.
And GPA, a number. Not, I really want to know about the, Great Depression so that I can, because that's interesting to me.
Right.
And I think that's where like, when I turn to ChatGPT, it's because I want a crash course on something that's really, and then I'm going to go deeper.
Yeah.
That's a starting point. It's not an ending point. But I'm actually I'm not just copying and pasting it. Like, I'm reading this stuff. There's no reason for me to study it, except for that I want to know it. And I think that's what we have to instill in kids. And when we focus so much on what we're teaching them, we actually wind up teaching them a bunch of stuff that they don't care about.
Right. No, that's a really good.
Yeah, it's like
there's so much of what you just said that just resonates deep inside of me. It really does, because that's kind of like my mindset too. I did my master's program because I want to be able, to make this podcast successful. So use those tools that I learned to really put it back into this podcast and make it successful, help other people be successful parents, fathers.
Right.
But then the world of business is an interesting place. So it's like learning how to operate and navigate that. It's not just to be like, oh, I got an MBA, hire me as a manager now.
Right. Well, that's the kind of credentialing system. The credentialing, and I'm not knocking it. Right. I want my doctor to go to med school. Right. I don't hear me like critiquing the system as a whole, but or that aspect, especially of higher ed, master's degrees and beyond. At that point, I think most, not all, but maybe an MBA is kind of an exception to this rule. I know that there are some MBAs are kind of these 18-month, and then it's not a vocational degree. It's
right, exactly.
It's a little bit of a rubber stamp. I mean, I don't want to say it's like a rubber stamp, but there's an aspect to that where it's like lots of people.
A big aspect of it, yeah.
And you're just trying to do it. I don't want to say you're doing it for clout, but many people are just doing it for clout, right?
Yep.
But most masters, like, people don't go into a counseling program, I hope, because they don't want to be a counselor.
Right.
People don't go into pre-med because they don't want to be a doctor. So there's an aspect of which, when we get specialized later on, all of a sudden it's, now people are interested.
Right.
And Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but that
No, you didn't.
that really strikes a tone, because I think by providing like a cookie cutter education, whether that's in home or out of home, you're kind of taking away from the child their agency, their sense of self. Whereas like the difference between, as you put it, like a rubber stamp degree versus a vocational one is like finally they're pursuing something that is meaningful to them, that is purposeful to them, that is part and parcel with defining who they are and who they're becoming.
Right. So I'll give you a great example. We're signing my kid up for summer camp right now, and we weren't going to do it because my kid just likes to play with the next door neighbor kids, and they're in public school, and he's in forest school. So summer is this magical time when they're just like they can play all day.
Yeah.
And we found out that they're from Jordan, that they're going to spend the entire summer in Jordan. And we just found this out. So they're going to spend 4 months. And my kid's just going to have nobody to play with. And when I say these kids are at my house, as much as I see my own kids almost. But certainly between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m.
Right.
I see them as much as I see any of my kids. And they're going to be gone for 4 months. So then we decided, okay, we're going to sign him up for this summer camp that's through his school, forest school thing that he goes to. And my wife is looking at it and she's like, I don't know if I want to sign him up for this until I ask more questions about this. And I'm like, oh, like what questions? She's like, some of these just seem really schooly. There's one about mythology. Like it's a theme every week, and you can sign up for as many weeks as you want. And there's one about mythology. Is he really going to like that? Because it's probably going to be like a lot of school. It's going to be a lot of teaching. And there's this other one that's, playing in the creek. Oh, he'll love that because he just wants to play in the creek all the time. And I said, literally, this is 2 minutes before we got on this call. I said, what makes you think that learning makes the experience worse?
Ooh, wow.
What makes you think that he's going to have a less great time because there's learning involved? Because I'm telling you right now, if you said, John, you can go to this creek every day, or you can have somebody teach you something and also play in the creek every day, I'm definitely picking the second one.
Right.
Like, education is recreation.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, yeah, you're 100% right. But that's the thing, the idea that like learning is a chore that is to be avoided. And like summer, why would we spend time learning?
Right.
It's summer break. This is our time free from learning. It's when you love learning, like my son has learned to love learning, like he's, Dad, teach me.
Right.
Like anything he's interested in. We're talking about puberty last night. He was just like, tell me more about this. I want to know more. So why do these people do this? Like, why do these people? So what is it? And he's asking me questions. Like, I hear people saying LGBT. What is that? Can you like give me more info on that? Like, so is that part of this or is that part of it? Like, he's desperate for the knowledge, versus kids who are like, I don't. Learning has become this job that I hate.
Yeah.
And so learning out, anything other than Fortnite and Minecraft, I want no part of that. And that's just totally different.
Yeah. So, and that's a really great point about like helping encourage our children to build that love for learning as opposed to seeing it as a chore, which, if you go through, not saying that you can't build the love for learning in like say the public school system, but it might be a little bit harder depending on who the kid is, just because it's okay, you have to do X, Y, and Z and you don't have any say in that. But that aside, like, what have you found as ways that are great to help our kids develop that love for learning?
Well, I think the first thing to say is, you said it's not impossible in the public school system, and I would agree with that because I experienced, at least in part, a person in my life fostered a love of learning in me, even though I went to public school. So it's possible. That said, it has never been harder than it is right now. Like, it is so much harder. And it is not because public school teachers are bad. Like, it is because the emphasis has been increasingly on metrics-driven, test-driven, like, competency. And you can draw a straight line over the last 30 years that we are, at this point, the most tested we have ever been in history. And so I think it's really hard. Let me just say that first. And I'm not encouraging everybody to pull their kid out of public school. It's not. I'm an advocate for the idea of public school. But I think it starts, probably the most effective thing that we can do is to go to public schools, join your school board, go to the meetings, and just be that really stick in the mud person who's just like, how is this making my child want to learn?
Right.
How is this encouraging my kid to learn? And eventually there's going to need to be reforms, and those reforms are going to start by undoing a lot of the reforms of the last 20 years.
Right.
The reforms of the last 20 years, moving away from arts, moving away from physical education. In Illinois, we do have mandatory physical education, thankfully. Moving away from recess, moving away from child-led learning into, more teacher-led learning, for lack of a better term. Those are all things that have to happen systemically, structurally in schools.
Right.
Just way more effective. And the interesting thing is we've known this. We've known this forever. And we do all of the best research on how to educate people effectively in the United States. We are great at it. It is one of our primary, we have lots of conversations about tariffs and imports and exports. Our number one export is our research in the United States. We do better research than anyone for almost anything. Why do you think that we got, the COVID vaccine first? Because we are better at freaking researching than anyone in the world. We are so good at it. Not to say that there isn't great research out there in the world, but our systems are set up for great research. We have known our research is right now being implemented in Scandinavia, in Denmark, in Sweden, in Norway. Our research is being implemented in Korea, and they are having massive success. And when they go to make those reforms in those public school systems, their reference list is a bunch of American universities. So we actually are exporting what we know about how to do school well while failing to implement it here in the United States. So that's the first step, is that we just need to take our own stinking advice. We know what to do, and we're not doing it. The second thing is that you at home want to de-emphasize as much as possible reward-based learning. Meaning, you need to do whatever self-work you must do to not give a crap about what their grades are. Oh, John, but, what if my kid doesn't get into this school? Let me tell you this. My cousin lives one of the best, he lives an amazing life. He's got 2 kids, beautiful wife, living his best life. He's a teacher. He went to the 2nd or 3rd best private boarding school in the nation. He went to school with the Prince of Saudi Arabia's kid. That is where he went to high school. He got into Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all of them. He chose to go to the same high school as me, who got a same college as me, who got a 3.0 GPA. The average ACT score at this school is like a 26 in Chicago. It was still a university, it's still whatever, but he chose to go to that school. He's living an amazing life right now. Didn't go to Harvard, didn't go to Yale, didn't go to Princeton. Could have gotten into any of them. He was the class president of that school. Okay? He could have gone anywhere, done anything. Just because he chose not to does not make his life worse. So take your reward system, flip it on its head and say, I don't care what grades you get. I don't care what you get on the SAT or ACT. If you want to care about that stuff, you let me know and I'll support you.
Right.
But if you don't want to care about that stuff, you never have to care about that stuff. That's number one. Number two is, number one is structural change. Number two is de-emphasizing rewards-based education. Just saying, instead of saying, how'd you do on that test? You say, how'd you feel about it?
Right.
That's a huge difference. Number three is you have to model love of learning at home. You have to be the person who's, let's go to the museum. Why? Because I want to. Because I want to learn. I love learning about new things.
Yeah.
And if you are excited about learning, your kid is going to see that. Whatever you want to see in your kid, you just got to model yourself. This is a fundamental principle in my book. So this is why, punishment free, right? You don't have to punish your kids when you just do the right thing yourself. They're going to follow you. I mean, sometimes they're going to push back, but by and large, you're going to model that, and they're going to do it. And so, one of the things my kid knows that I just love, I am just a hawk for any new information, and I'm just going to chase it down. And what is the biggest bird that doesn't fly? Let's research it. Come over here. Okay, well, how should we find the answer? Let's Google it. Okay, here's this YouTube video. You think that's trustworthy or no? Maybe it's probably right, but let's verify. Okay, how can we verify? Okay, let's Google this. And so my kid uses his tablet now as mostly a research tool. And he'll play games, but even his games, he'll be playing out his research in the games. So understanding that if you love learning stuff, your kid will love learning stuff.
Yeah.
And those are the three things. I think we have to move away from. I'm an advocate for just eliminating grades in school. I don't think that it's proven to be effective. I think you can make a really strong case against grades. I'm a huge advocate for eliminating homework. I don't think that there's any efficacy to. I think it just indoctrinates people to have terrible work-life balance.
Yeah.
Hey, go work for 8 hours, then when you come home, work some more.
Yeah.
Like that, you're just training people to be workaholics at that point. Like so, I think there are these other small changes like eliminating homework. Obviously, that's a big change, but eliminating homework, eliminating grades, more project-based learning. We can get into age segregation and how harmful it is. One of the other big things is, you put a bunch of third graders in a class together. What we know from research is that they're going to bully each other, because kids need to have age diversity. They need to have a fifth grader in the class. They need to have a seventh grader in the class, who's going to kind of say, "Hey, that's not nice. Don't do that."
Right.
And also, what we also see is that when third graders are around 4-year-olds, their parenting instincts start to come out. So they won't do that like kind of problematic bullying stuff in front of a younger kid. So you also have to eliminate bullying as part of this, because school is a hostile environment for a huge number of kids at this point. And a big part of that is just that we're cramming increasing numbers of kids in increasingly smaller age gaps into rooms. And so there's all of these other changes. But if you want to just do what you can do at home, don't care about grades. And number two, you have to model it yourself.
How do you, as a busy person, I mean, obviously you're taking the interest to raise your children, but like, how do you really awaken that kind of spirit inside of yourself? Just to be something authentic, not, I want my kid to learn, so I'm just going to put on this show of I want to learn too.
Well, I think we can fake it till we make it a little bit. I don't think that it's necessarily guarantee. Fake it till you make it has a lot of neuroanatomical, like neurophysiological evidence to support that it works.
Okay.
If you're ever feeling down and sad, you listen to a happy song, you feel better. Why?
True. Yeah.
You don't want to listen to the happy song, but you know that the happy song is going to make you feel happy. You can just smile for 30 seconds; it'll do the same thing.
Right.
You ever feel disconnected with your partner, you hug them for 30 seconds, even though you don't want to. After about 15 seconds, you're going to start to want to hug them.
Right.
Like, we know that fake it till you make it works with our brains, not against our brains. Like, so there's an aspect where you can just fake it. The second thing is you have to realize, what are the things that actually interest you? Like, for my wife, she had to get out of anything science-based because she was so good at science. She became a nurse. She could have gone on to become a doctor if she wanted to. She literally just didn't want to become a doctor because she didn't want to stay in school. Like, she graduated nursing school faster than anyone in the history of the college. So like she was so good at school, she had to move out of science. So she's a professional photographer right now. That's what she does.
Wow.
And she loves business. She loves marketing. She loves social media. She loves all the stuff. But she had to literally just break herself. Whatever I do, it cannot be too close to the thing that I've learned to hate.
Right.
So whatever that thing is for you that sparks your interest, I think all of us have those things. And a lot of guys, it's golf. It's sports. Okay, but how can you treat sports as education? How can you treat sports like, hey, who is the best Cubs pitcher of the last 20 years?
Right.
Let's do some research instead of just talking out of our butt.
Right.
And now you've modeled to your kid, it doesn't have to be like solving unsolvable mathematical equations. Like that's research is anything. Oh, I want to screw around in the new recipe for banana nut muffins.
Right.
well, let me look at 20 recipes for banana nut muffins and see what they all have in common and see which one has something different. And maybe I'll throw that one, or maybe I'll come up with a hybrid or whatever, or this is what I like about this one or this one. I need to add more chocolate chips, whatever. That's research. Like, that part of the breaking is the breaking from this paradigm of here are the things that are worthy of your attention in school and here are the things that aren't.
Yeah.
And I think that understanding that alone, like that alone, everything that you do, you know how many guys are obsessed with their lawns? And if they just understood that that was an exercise in chemistry, but they don't. Yeah. They're just like, I don't care about school.
Yeah.
Which is dumb. It's objectively dumb because you're ruining, you're trading your life away.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And that's a game-changing concept right there, because curiosity is liberating. It's because if you're not curious, then you are subscribing to the singular way that was defined before you. Right. And then, okay, so, you're at the risk of becoming a brainless automaton, right? But if you are curious, then all of a sudden, I wonder if I cut through the woods here, as opposed to following the trail around it, what will I find? Maybe I'm going to find birds and snakes and insects, or,
and maybe
a
you'll
hidden
get poison
trove.
oak.
Right.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's an experience too. And like that's the thing that people like. We're so worried about any harm that we're like, oh man, if my kid spends too much. Great example. This is a pretty hot button topic. I'm sure that you'll be happy with me going here. One of my friends, her name's Cheryl Lynn. She's a pastor as well. She was telling me about this thing with I don't know if it was her kid or somebody else's kid, but it was walking in on her teenage son while he's watching pornography, and like immediately like just fleeing, right? Just run, like just that never happened, right? Like just totally ignore or whatever. Instead, what she had counseled this parent to do, what they did, was they just got curious about it. They're like, "Also, what was that? Like, what are you into?" Like literally, like stuff that no parent would ever ask their kid.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like this kid totally had a reshaping of his mind around this activity, where he was like, "Oh, I'm not just like mindlessly engaging in this thing. Like, I'm actually making choices.
Right.
I'm making choices to like either participate or not participate, or do this, and like how is this affecting me, and like all these things." And it was like literally around the most like taboo pot you can never like ever. It's the most taboo, never talk about it type thing. And it was a mom. I remember that part. It was like a mom with her teenage son.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, you can't possibly do that. And it's like, no, like literally even there, if you lead with curiosity. I'm not saying it was comfortable. Like getting poison oak is not comfortable. Falling out of a tree and breaking your arm is not comfortable. It was uncomfortable. Yeah. But like learning occurred. And it was this deep sense of, again, not teaching our kids what, hey, don't or do that here or lock the door, or like what. That's teaching what?
Right.
Instead of teaching, like, tell me more about that. I'm curious about that. Do you like think through what you're doing, or is that like a plan? Did you plan, or like how did you get there? And all of that becomes this. Oh man, now I've just had to think.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing about parenting, not from a what perspective, but from a how or a what, a why perspective. Like curiosity, leading with curiosity, letting your kids learn the things that they need to learn rather than forcing upon them the things that you feel that they need to know. It's amazing because the truth is your kids are actually going to follow your values most of the time.
Right.
Because they're going to go, wow, I was raised in this really loving, caring home where nothing was off limits and we had conversations about things. They're going to follow those values, and then so actually you're going to wind up instilling the same values that you want. You're just not going to instill them because you're the hierarchy. You're going to instill them because you were willing to have that really good and hard conversation. And so that, like, even stuff like that, right? That's education. Yeah. Like that's a teaching moment. And most people are like, no, that's a discipline moment, or that's a not don't never talk about this. That's a shame moment.
Yeah.
All of them are teaching moments. In fact, what I argue in my book is that the only time you shouldn't teach is when most of us do most of our teaching, which is when your kid, in the exact moment when, your kid just punched their brother.
Right.
And you just go, what are you doing? Why'd you just punch your brother? Like, that's when we want to teach. And that's really the only time when you shouldn't. Because that's the time when their brain is like, burp, burp,
Right.
Yeah.
shut down.
Something this highlights for me, hopefully you can hear me or my dog barking, is that this requires intentionality from the parent's perspective. Because if you leave it for the moment when you walk in on your kid looking at porn, if you leave it for when your kid is wailing on another kid, like whatever it is, you're going to react whatever your default mode is, which we were just talking about this with your mom the other day, Andrew. You're probably going to default to the way you were parented, which may or may not be the best way. And so if we want to kind of like hijack our reaction, we have to be intentional about that.
I mean, this is the time to plug the book, right? So this is what this book is about.
Yeah.
This is what my book is about, is this entire process of, we're talking a lot about education because that was what the reel was about. And I have lots of thoughts and considerations about that. But really, all discipline is education. It's teaching your kid right from wrong.
Right.
My argument is, in the book, there are way more effective ways to do that than punishment.
Absolutely.
And actually punishment goes against what good teaching looks like. Good teaching relies on correcting your own mistakes and understanding to learn from the consequences of your actions.
Right.
The consequences of your actions are not those things that your parents impose on you because you have been inconvenient to them, or you have disrespected them, or you have done something that in some way triggered them. The consequences of your actions are, if you punch a kid at the park, that kid doesn't want to play with you anymore. And that's the consequence, because when you're an adult, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe the police are going to come get you if you punch some person at the park.
Right.
But actually, in most of life, the consequences are not going to be law enforcement. The consequences are going to be you get fired from your job because you were a jerk. The consequences are going to be that relationship ends because you didn't know how to reconcile.
Right.
And understanding that, like, actually you can teach your kids that now in the sandbox, and it's gonna go with them for the rest of their life, versus just, well, why do you do the things that you do? So that I can avoid my parents being mad at me and taking away my iPad.
Right.
Which is just, distracting. But in order to do that, as you were saying, Paul, you have to lead with intentionality. And you can't lead with intentionality if you are still being triggered by every single thing that your kid does, and you are still so emotionally insecure. And I say this in the most loving and kind way that I can, because I am still emotionally insecure. If you are constantly just playing catch up with your feelings when your kid does something. Yesterday, I yelled at my 3-year-old after swearing to myself that I'd been yelling at my kids too much. And any amount is too much, but yelling begets yelling. So the more you do it, the more you have to do it, which means the more you will do it. And I had just kind of backslid in the last month, where it has just not been great. It's partially just like my kids' ages, and partially just like being exhausted. I have a 6-month-old. Like, I slept 3 hours last night, maybe. So, and it's just, she's not usually like that, but just some nights are that way. And I yelled at my 3-year-old because he slapped me across the face when I was holding him. And I put him down and I said, I don't like that.
Which most people
which
would
is
probably
exactly
respond the
great
same way.
parenting to say, yeah, I don't like that. Don't do that to me, is exactly the right parenting. But I literally said it in this really aggressive way. And my wife heard me and she was like, so that's still yelling. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? And she was like, be more regulated. Actually, just be stronger, dude. Be less triggered by your 3-year-old. And that takes work.
Yeah.
That takes time, and that takes effort, and that takes understanding, and it takes self-compassion. And, beating the crap out of myself for the rest of the day and saying, oh, I'm so bad, I shouldn't have done that, is also some, like, victim mindset nonsense.
Right.
You just go, you know what? You're right. I really don't need to yell at a 3-year-old. I have this quote in the book this whole, at the beginning of, I think it's Unleashing Our Emotional Superpowers. I don't remember which chapter it is, by Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor. And his kind of famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about how even in a concentration camp where he's literally being tortured, he's still, the one freedom that his captors, the Nazis, could not take from him was that he got to decide how he felt about the situation.
Right.
He got to decide how he perceived it. He could not, he had no freedom of movement, he had no freedom over what he ate or what he did, but he had freedom over how he felt. And they could, and they could not take it from him, and it drove them nuts. And so that's been my mantra of just, I get to choose. The thing that separates humans from all other species of mammal, even the other high-brain apes, the thing that separates humans from them is the difference of when a conditioned stimulus happens, you do not have to follow it with the conditioned response.
Right.
You can choose a different way. And all of us have to choose that with our kids, and that's the real challenge.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff, John. And I think the challenge, too, is recognizing that, yes, we have that ability to choose differently, but at the end of the day, we are still animals. We still have that conditioned response. So, and that's great. It's good that we recognize that because, get slapped across the face, probably going to want to respond with yelling.
Acceptance is the first step.
And then so if we slowly but surely, it's not going to be a flip of the trigger and then all of a sudden, we choose we're not going to respond by yelling. It's going to be building those new neural pathways of how we respond.
That's right. And that's the book in a nutshell. It's how to build those neural pathways so that you don't default to punishment because, after the first chapter, that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And now how do we build all the neural pathways to do better?
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, if you haven't checked out John's book, I've read it, and I have to say that I think it's the closest thing, I've heard many times, there's no parenting handbook out there. And I'm not just saying this because I've read books. I've read self-help books, I've read parenting books, I've read everything. I think this is the closest thing to a parenting handbook there is because you do such a good job, John, of summarizing all the research, all the literature out there that shows us how we can focus on what matters and set our children up to be who they are meant to be, not who we want them to be. And also become better parents ourselves.
My favorite piece of feedback, Paul, on the book is not that I say anything new. In fact, one of the interesting things is that if you look at all of the not 5-star reviews, I've been really blessed that I have 170 5-star reviews or something. It's so cool to see people love this book so well. Yeah. The not 5-star reviews that I have on Goodreads, if you go and read the reviews, I read every review, which is maybe not good for my mental health, but I do it anyway. It's overwhelmingly good, so it's okay. Yeah. The ones who knock me are the ones who are like, this guy isn't saying anything new. I picked up this book, and I've read all the parenting books, and he doesn't say anything new. And I think that is very true. And I respond back to them, and I say, absolutely. You're 100% right. If you open this book thinking that if you've read every parenting book, if you've read The Conscious Parent by Dr. Chevalier, if you've read The Whole Brain Child by Tina Payne Bryson and Dan Siegel, if you've read The 5 Principles of Parenting by Elise Bressman, if you've read Good Inside by Becky Kennedy, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen by Elaine Maslish and Adele Faber, if you've read all those, you read my book, no new information. The one thing that I do, I think, better than anyone else, based on the reviews that I've gotten, I didn't know I was doing this when I wrote it, but based on the reaction is, and I don't feel like garbage the way that you tell me to do it. I've read all those other ones, and they were right, but they were right in such a way that I felt like a terrible parent when I put the book down. Yeah. Versus, I hope that when you read my book, which I hope all of your listeners will, of course, even if they just get it from the library, I don't care. I don't need the royalty. I just get the book, listen to it on audiobook, I read it. But when they read the book, it should be that you walk away going, oh, well, I'm actually probably doing a lot better than I think I'm doing.
Right.
And here are some things that I can do that are going to make my life 10 times easier. Of course, that information's there. It's not like I'm not going to give you no information, but oh man, I'm actually kind of know what I'm now after reading this. I kind of know what I'm doing,
right?
And I can do these other things that are going to help. So that's been my favorite thing, is that people read the book and go, I don't feel like garbage after I read it.
Yeah.
And that, so if you say that it's a great handbook, Paul, I love that. What I even love even more than that is that you read it and didn't immediately go, I don't want to have this guy on my show because he's going to talk to me about parenting, and I'm going to feel like I'm, terrible at the end of this. And I think that that's the real goal. You cannot change. If you're punishing yourself, to stop punishing your kids. If discipline is ineffective punishment, if punishment is ineffective discipline, it's ineffective discipline for everyone, including you.
Right.
Yep.
So if I'm going to try and shame you and punish you into being a better parent, guess what? It's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So besides reading your book,
Yeah.
what's one thing that you would like to have our listeners, whether they're dads or aspiring dads, what's one thing that you would encourage them or challenge them to do as a takeaway from this conversation, from your experiences and whatnot?
Yeah. So, direct you to my website. Yeah. If you're not going to read my book, at least go to my website, wholeparentacademy.com, and I have lots of resources there too. No, as a practical take-home thing, I would say, just if you want the best parenting advice that I can give you, it's the last chapter of the book, chapter 13. It's your best parenting happens long after that thing that you feel that you need to discipline for. So if you want to change one thing about your parenting and it be overnight 10 times easier to parent your kid, rather than trying to parent and trying to discipline, teach, punish, issue consequences, whatever you want to do, instead of trying to do that in the moment of dysfunction, let everybody calm down. Let everyone chill out. Have a snack. Take a nap. Come back an hour later. And then do those things that I talk about in chapter 13, all those empower for the future things.
Okay.
If you do nothing else, you don't need any brain hacks. You don't need to know anything about psychology. You don't need to know anything about neuroanatomy. If all you do is say, I refuse to teach a kid who's screaming. Yeah. And I refuse to teach while I feel like screaming.
Right.
1,000% better. And by the way, you are the expert in your kid. So this is why I can't tell you exactly what to say an hour later. I can't tell you exactly what discipline technique to employ. But I promise you, you are smart enough that if you don't do this in your moment of feeling like your head's going to explode, you're going to figure out exactly what you need to say.
Right.
And by the way, it's probably the right thing. And if it isn't the right thing, you will know.
Right.
So that is, I think, the number one piece of advice is just completely change your mindset around when you need to discipline. Okay. In the same way that you completely change your mindset around your goals. That's the other thing is parent your kid to be successful at 40, not successful at 20. Right. And I think that you would realize, oh my gosh, wow, I care much more about how my kid, my kid got disciplined for talking in class to a friend who was having a really hard day because they just lost their gerbil or maybe their dad or something. You know what I mean? They got disciplined in class for talking to that kid and empathizing with them instead of studying statistics. Right. You're parenting for 20. You're going, you need to focus on school while school's happening. You're parenting for 40. You go, being a better friend is way more important.
Yeah. That's
a huge switch.
Yeah, that is. That's as soon as you said that, I'm like, I've never even thought of that, and I'm not even, I'm going through all this stuff trying to learn how to be a dad, and that's probably the most impactful thing I've heard yet, honestly.
Start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Most of our parenting techniques directly undermine, and I know we got to go, but most of our parenting techniques directly undermine our long-term goals for our kids. Yeah. If you want a summary for the whole book, the overwhelming majority of things that we do undermine our long-term goals in service of short-term compliance and ease. Yeah. And ironically, it actually makes everything harder. But even if it was, even if parenting from 0 to 18 was way harder the way that I proposed, which by the way it's not, it's way easier. But if it was way harder, it would still be worth it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. I hope we can have you on here quite often because this has just been amazing. So I've got so much out of this. Yeah.
Whenever I'm around, I'm happy to be here.
And we're looking forward to the next book. And yeah, I hope all of our listeners go out and get a copy of your book because it is good. And you gave us a good summary, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much, John.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, we know we got to go. So, all right, thanks again, and until next time.
Thank you all. Thank you, Paul.